There have been many attempts to classify what is included or excluded from the moral community. I published an article on the Prindle Post website entitled Fantastic Beasts and How to Categorize Them. In that article, I analyze how the short book Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them attempts to make these decisions. The book tries to make a distinction between creatures who are beasts and those that are beings in the Harry Potter universe. The book notes that a being is a creature worthy of legal rights and a voice in the governance of the magical world. The key question involves what properties a creature must have to be categorized as either beast or being. This is known in ethics classes as the question of the grounds of moral considerability. Identifying the grounds of moral considerability faces a well-known problem. Any chosen ground runs the risk of leaving out creatures that should be in the moral community, or risks including creatures that should not be in the moral community. These problems appear throughout Fantastic Beasts. The book offers 3 different grounds for being. The first attempt says that any member of the magical community that walked on 2 legs would henceforth be granted the status of being, all others to remain beasts. But this lets in too many 2-legged creatures who are unable to participate in the governance of the wizarding world. For example, garden gnomes. What went wrong? This ground used a physical characteristic irrelevant to questions of self-governance. So, by focusing on a physical property, this definition included entities that did not belong. This failure led to the second attempt, which defined a being as those who could speak with the human tongue. But this let in trolls who could be taught to say but not understand some English phrases. It also left out merpeople who could only speak Mermish but were highly intelligent. The problem with this attempt is that it tried to use an activity as a marker of a psychological property. Apparently, the wizarding world got the memo and they found a better definition. The third attempt defined a being as any creature that has sufficient intelligence to understand the laws of the magical community and to bear part of the responsibility in shaping those laws. The philosophical term for this set of capabilities is autonomy. Philosophers know, however, that grounding moral considerability in autonomy is problematic. On this view, individuals need sophisticated cognitive abilities to be identified as moral agents. Any individual that lacks the psychological abilities needed for moral judgment are non-persons and thus wholly outside the moral community. In other words, non-persons are things, have only instrumental value, and can be equated with tools. You can own them and dispose of them without morally harming them. But this definition also excludes human infants, and we do not think of them as outside the moral community. What this book fails to account for is that there are not just things and moral agents. There is a large range of creatures that can be considered moral patients. A moral agent is an individual that meets the Kantian definition of a person. It is an individual who is in the moral community and also shapes it. A thing, however, is something that does not have interests and thus is outside the moral community. But a moral patient is an individual that has interests, specifically moral interests against being harmed. Thus, they are members of the moral community, just not governing members. In the human world, infants and young children are moral patients. So what have we learned from this short introduction to this fictional book? Fantastic Beasts clearly supports psychological accounts of the grounds of moral considerability. In other words, what matters to questions of morality are psychological properties. This is consistent with the theme of the Harry Potter novels, where the main villains focus on blood status as a marker of membership in the wizarding community. In other words, only a villain would solely focus on physical characteristics as a source of moral value. I'm Jim Okapal, Professor of Philosophy at Missouri Western State University, and this has been a Griffon University production. Share ideas.